Welcome to my channel. My name's Bissy, and there's no doubting that Lestat is immensely powerful. He has gifts that other vampires like Doris from Talamasca could only dream of. I'm going to break down every single one of his powers as presented in the show so far. Now, some of his powers are from his maker Magnus, who despite everything was incredibly powerful. Some have developed and evolved over the centuries, and I think others are actually from within him. The dark gift enhancing powers he already possessed as a human, but he also learned a lot from Armand as a new vampire, in the absence of his own maker. So with that said, let's get into the video. Now, I don't believe that Armand was the only vampire capable of wiping minds and altering memories in the show. I think they actually showed us that Lestat had this power too. So in season 1, Lestat and Louis are sat with Tom in a saloon. They were invited under the guise of campaign donations. But after they realise that they are under suspicion for Claudia's killing spree, they freeze the scene and both get to work on the police commissioner and on Tom. Louis walks over to the police commissioner and Lestat skulks over to Tom. And despite it being Louis' tale, we don't actually see what he does to the police commissioner. But we do see that Lestat removes their encounter from Tom's mind and leaves him with a lovely X on his face for good measure. Now, I was just as outraged with Armand as Louis and Daniel were when they discovered that he had gone into their minds and changed their memories. But I wonder why it never shook the earth when Lestat literally did the same thing to Tom. Was it not such a revelation because it wasn't to somebody that we cared for? I think this might be the case, as if Lestat did this to Louis or Claudia, we would have been outraged. But there were so many subtle cases of Lestat displaying immense power, but in an understated way all throughout season 1. So it seems that fire can't kill Lestat, unless he's willing. As Lestat ponders his behaviour back in Magnus's lair, after the trial and Claudia's passing, Louis and Armand threaten him with their fire gifts. Lestat doesn't flinch, despite being aware of Louis' recent homicidal rampage. Lestat says, "I have the blood of a cashier in me." He doesn't know who that is, but the fact in and of itself makes your immediate desire an impossibility. And I have to be willing, and I'm not in the mood. So I'd love for this video to be about the show only. You may have noticed that I didn't add a spoiler warning to the start, but I do think it's important to provide some context around the Akasha to truly understand the importance of this power. If you don't want any Akasha spoilers, please skip to this timestamp, as I'm going to give a brief but high-level breakdown from the novel, an explanation that I think covers how he has this power. Ready? Okay. So in the novel, The Vampire Lestat, we get Magnus' story as recalled by Lestat. I will break down Magnus' story in a separate video, but I will say that we get the history of vampires from him. Starting with Akasha and Enkill in Egypt, and ancient Rome, where human Marius the Romanus catches the attention of a vampire. There is a calamity happening all over the world. Vampires are being spontaneously burnt to a crisp, the most ancient among them barely surviving. Marius is taken by this vampire and no pained into getting to the bottom of this calamity. He visits Egypt, and one night he's visited very briefly by a mysterious vampire. This vampire tells him of those who must be kept, that they are the very first of their kind. They are so ancient now that they have turned to something like stone. Someone put them out into the sun, and although the sun barely bronzed their skin, the effect on the other vampires was enormous. The secret that so few vampires know is that all vampires are connected to the source. If Akasha is burnt, then all vampires suffer. But as Lestat has fed directly from Akasha, he now has the source of all vampires running through his veins. So her protection is now his protection. So with Akasha's blood running through his veins, he is stronger than most vampires, and therefore protected from fire. I wonder if we'll see this really put to the test in this upcoming season. In season 1, episode 6, Louis recalls to Daniel that Lestat chased Claudia down on a train to bring her back home to Louis. after she had tried to leave them for the second time. On the train, Lestat says to Claudia, "And lucky for our family, I can hear the thoughts of vampires at a very great distance." Lestat proves this by letting Claudia know that he knows that her education was not only found in the books from university libraries, but via the vicious vampires that are out there. He lets her know that he knows about Bruce and the horrid things he did to her, and cruelly adds that Bruce thinks of her often. But I wonder, does this power include humans too? Can Lestat hear the thoughts of humans at a great distance too? We know that Guy Anatole from Talamasa can hear the thoughts of both humans and vampires. Not at such a great distance just yet, though. I wonder if we'll find out in season 3. Freezing time, or freezing a scene, is the first of his powers Lestat displays openly to Louis in season 1, episode 1, during the card game with the movers and shakers of New Orleans at the time. Of course, Lestat uses his glamour on Louis in their first interaction at the pleasure house, but Louis is completely unaware of what is happening at that point. Side note, I will touch on Lestat's glamour in its own section. Initially, Lestat is talking to Louis telepathically, whilst at the same time having a conversation with the men at the table. But slowly, the scene around them stops. Wine and liquor stops mid-flow, cards held mid-air, and people frozen in mid-motion. This display intrigues Louis. Louis even asks Lestat how he does it at a later point, and would actually ask Lestat to teach him this trick. "Soon, monsieur, patience," is what Lestat responds. In season 2, episode 7, Lestat is giving his rehearsed testimony to a captivated audience. He's describing the night that Louis leaves him for what could have been forever. This is after Lestat had explained to Louis his fear of vampire loneliness. Santiago intercedes to attempt to explain what vampire loneliness is to the crowd. Lestat is surprised that the audience don't already know this. Lestat picks a gentleman out of the crowd and simply kneels to his level, looks him in the eyes and holds his hand. In doing so, Lestat transfers his feelings and emotions to this man. The audience member is overcome with emotion and immediately admonishes Louis for threatening Lestat with this feeling. On a side note, Lestat must have been feeling that loneliness, even at that moment, to be able to draw on it to share with another. That makes me sad. Even though he's in the middle of the trial that's gonna end in Claudia and Madeline's death, it still makes me sad. So in the show, we haven't seen any other vampire come close to displaying this power. Santiago is as alluring as Lestat is on stage. Armand can call other vampires from a very great distance too, but no one that we've seen so far in the show has displayed this power. Does it come from the ancient blood running through his veins? Did he acquire and practice the skill all by himself, maybe with Antoinette? Or was it bestowed onto him by his maker? It's a really interesting thought. In season 1, episode 5, Lestat lifts Louis 2 kilometers into the air and drops him at the end of their biggest fight. Of course, it ended up being more than just a fight. Lestat loses all restraint, and as he put it during the trial, it all came loose. But some viewers have commented that Louis, and we the audience, shouldn't have been shocked by this revelation. That Lestat actually displayed his cloud gift in season 1, episode 2, during his and Louis' first night of intimacy. I did go into this in detail in my Lestat Lies video. I believe that Louis was unaware that he had actually left the ground at that moment. I believe that that moment was that intense he felt like he was floating, rather than knowing that he had physically left the ground. And besides, we as the audience were provided this imagery, not Louis. If he had, he wouldn't have been surprised by Lestat lifting him into the air in episode 5. And in episode 6 of season 1, when Louis and Claudia are laying the ground rules for Lestat's return to their family, Louis clearly states to Lestat, no lying, and that includes lies of exaggeration and omission. So if you can fly, you tell us you can fly. Lestat tells Louis and Claudia that you can't teach the cloud gift. You're either born with it or you're not. Claudia, of course, doesn't believe this, but this is what Lestat tells them. So does the cloud gift suddenly emerge one day? Or did Lestat practice and then discover that he did indeed have the gift? When did it present itself? A decade after he's turning? A century? I hope we get show answers in the Vampire Lestat. Lestat can read minds, human and vampires, but the mind gift is not just the ability to read the thoughts of others. The possessor of the gift can see, feel, and almost taste the subject's histories. You can feel their happiness, their pain, their love. We get a first-hand explanation of what it is like to develop this skill from Louis in Season 1, Episode 2, after his initial introduction to mind reading in the streets, when we are introduced to the opera singer. Louis says,
I listened to his thoughts as Lestat drank. This time they came with vision. I could see his life as he remembered it. Scenes from an Italian childhood, the Easter pageant in a mountain village. Something about a wet piece of bread in his pocket.
An intense experience for sure. In contrast to Louis' experience, Lestat discovers his power alone, as his maker left him with little more than a few fundamentals for survival. He didn't have the benefit of a teacher for this. He stumbled around and struggled with some of the things that he found in the minds that he read, particularly Nicholas's mind, but I won't get into too much about that here. So as well as the mind gift, Lestat also possesses another unbelievably powerful gift. I'm going to call it the mind gift, as Daniel so eloquently put it. It differs from the mind gift, as Lestat not only reads and experiences the subject's thoughts and memories, but he can reach into the person's mind and compel them to act as he wishes, even if only for a short while. Lestat demonstrated this gift twice in Interview with the Vampire. The first time is after Louis has had a tryst with an old flame who is now a soldier. Lestat is incredibly jealous. He overreacts and invites many soldiers to their townhouse. Because Louis likes a man in uniform, right? Louis is in fact not happy about this. However, he did seem to already be aware that Lestat possessed this power, as he was the one who asked Lestat to get rid of them. I wonder when Lestat used this gift in front of Louis previously on such a large scale. And of course, the second time was at the trial, when Lestat saves Louis' life by controlling the entire audience into sentencing Louis to banishment. On both occasions, using this power takes a massive physical toll on Lestat though. It seems like a power that he uses only when he has to. I wonder if he and Daniel will get into the banishment of it all in Season 3. Now, although Lestat initially hides his fire gift from Louis, in the pleasure house during their first meeting, at their home whilst Claudia is gone, and in the Season 1 finale on the balcony with Louis before they dance, he does eventually reveal that he has this gift in Season 2, Episode 8. This is only after he had seen Louis display this new power he had learned from Armand back in Paris. And Lestat says, "The fire gift in your honour." Lestat didn't have to hide this power anymore. Louis had acquired it now too. On a side note, I did notice that Louis didn't seem at all surprised on discovering that Lestat had this power. Maybe he just expects to be surprised by Lestat at this point. But it is interesting, as I do wonder if this scene in Season 2, Episode 8 actually happened. If it did, then this is our very first introduction to the real Lestat. But was this in real time? Or will Lestat contradict this meeting in the Vampire Lestat? Just like we know he will with what happened on the train with Claudia. I can't wait to find out. I will return to Lestat's vampiric powers in a very short while, but I just wanted to touch on Lestat's capacity for enduring. Now, I believe that this is actually a superpower that Lestat possesses. In Season 1, Episode 6, when Lestat is at his most open with Louis and Claudia, he finally answers the question, "Who made you?" His tale is harrowing and heartbreaking, and explains his issues with abandonment. I did an entire section on this in my Lestat Has Issues video, so please do check it out. And at the end of that monologue, Lestat says to Louis,
"But I have a capacity for enduring."
And boy, does he. Yes, Lestat has done some really awful things, and I'm not trying to excuse them by saying that he too has suffered. But he continues to endure. Granted, many of his hardships are of his own making, But many of his traumas are not. And he still has what seems like an endless capacity to keep going. So far in the show, anyway. Now, as promised, let's get back to Lestat's Glamour. Lestat uses this intense skill to draw in Louis during their very first interaction. In his interview with Daniel Malloy, Louis describes the feeling like this.
My body was seized with weakness, tied a string around my lungs, and I found myself immobilized.
So Louis was well aware of the effect when Lestat uses it on Paul, Louis' brother, during Lestat's first meeting with Louis' family. After being quite rude, Paul is mesmerized by Lestat's tale of his time in the monastery. Or perhaps it wasn't the tale itself, it's the glamour. Louis snaps them both out of it and shouts to Lestat not to do that to his family. Louis knows this power, or should I say, he knows the effect Lestat has on people, because at this point, Louis is unaware of Lestat's true nature. Lestat is extremely adept at this power, and as a viewer, even I was completely drawn into him on both occasions. On a side note, on both occasions, we as the audience are snapped out of it by slaps on the table. At both times, I was left with a feeling like I needed to shake it off. I can't imagine what that would actually feel like. So Lestat was already an alluring person as a human, and this power that was innate to him was indeed enhanced by the dark gift. We know his maker left him with not much more than a pile of money, but does this gift make him an even more engaging performer? He was completely adored in the 18th century, and I believe we're going to see a very loyal and zealous fan base for the Vampire Lestat. So my question is, does every vampire have this ability to some degree, or is Lestat just that special? So Lestat has an incredible memory. It seems all vampires do. Is this something to do with vampires never losing any more brain cells after they've been turned? I think it might be, because Lestat can recall details from over 230 years ago. I don't know what I had for dinner last week. I can't even remember what I wore last week. And that's not to speak of Armand, who can recall memories in great detail from over 500 years ago. In the novel, Lestat initially equates his new vampire strength to that of around 4 men, which was nothing compared with Marius' strength. Lestat struggled to lift things Marius tossed away as if they were weightless, but Lestat's strength invariably grew. And as of today, we don't know his true strength exactly, but I've got a feeling we're going to find out in season 3. One of the first powers any vampire notices is their speed. It's fun. And Lestat even displays it to Claudia after the trauma of her turning. It's a handy power, but not all vampires are made equally. Just like most of his powers, Lestat has exceptional speed, like blink of an eye speed. Lestat also has incredible self-restraint, from taking that little drink from Louis to withholding some of his greatest powers from Louis for over 20 years. Is this just Lestat, or was this granted to him by the dark gift? I ask, as Armand displays similar self-restraint all throughout seasons 1 and 2. It's undoubtable that Lestat has done some awful things, but he has been forgiven for them, especially by Louis. But he is also incredibly forgiving, particularly with Gabrielle and Marius, and even Armand. But as I mentioned, I want to stay as spoiler-free in this video as I can, but I will say that I do admire the ability to forgive in anybody. It is a superpower, in my opinion. Lestat has a beautiful singing voice and plays many instruments. Did his musical ability get better or improve once he became a vampire? Just like the gifts that the individuals had in the OA, and just after their NDEs, they got even better? Like the OA in her violin, Rachel's singing voice, and Renata's guitar playing, for example? I wonder if he'll touch on this in season 3. And another side note, if you haven't watched the OA, please do find some time and binge all of part 1 in one go. I promise you won't regret it. And then let's have a chat about it. Okay, so Lestat's love for Louis and Nicholas is a power, I believe. But especially for Louis. He loves so deeply, he even has love for Magnus after he's turned. But was that just a make-a-fleshling bond? Now, I will never not be convinced in the power of love. I just won't. To feel love as deeply as Lestat does is, for me, a positive and an immensely powerful thing. It's a strength, not a weakness, in my opinion. So if I've forgotten any of his powers, please do let me know. And if you'd like to support me and this channel, please do think about becoming a member of my Clean Club. You'll get access to the Sunday uploads early, as soon as they're done. If you join the Bissy Clean Club, you'll get discounts on all of my forthcoming merch, and you'll be able to suggest and vote on upcoming video topics. But every member will be able to vote. There are lots of other fun perks to becoming a member, and they'll only increase once I'm able to dedicate even more time to you and this channel. Thank you so much for watching. If you can't join, I'd love it if you subscribed and hit the like button. It all means the world to me. Thanks. Bye.